Well, good afternoon, good evening from everybody. I know I've missed you. I know you've missed me. Thanks for reaching out and checking in with me to see how I'm doing. I'm really excited tonight to have a show about expanding frontiers research, all the work that we've done and the great accomplishments that we've made. We really have made great strides, and I'm excited to just go over some of those highlights with you. You can go to expandingfrontiersresearch.org to donate to our work. And tonight we're going to go over not only our highlights, but we're also going to talk about the expenditures that we make, the FOIA process, and explain to you why the FOIA process isn't free all the time. In fact, it can be quite expensive. So there are lots of things to talk about. We also want to talk about the press coverage that we've received, and it's been really a fun year. So I'm going to welcome my friend Jack Brewer to the show. Jack, good evening.
Good evening. Hello, everyone. I see everybody showing up in chat. Ludacris, Simon Fly, Michael Reynolds. Hi, everybody. Amy, all of y'all. We're so glad you're here tonight. Thanks.
Bill and Jim, yeah, Emily, Tom X. I've just got to go up the list here really quick.
Bill's
Shadow
in there.
Victims,
William Poland. Yeah.
Peter, PL, yeah, there's lots of Stephen Padilla, lots of great people to be here. And I think, as I always say when I'm doing this show, one of the reasons that I love doing it so much is that I can see everybody in chat. And we've created this community that, in my opinion, is really just a very cohesive and a very respectful and helpful community. And I think that's been sadly missing in the UFO topic, and in other topics, as a matter of fact. Even though we have disagreements on specific things, it's important to disagree and to ask questions and to do that respectfully, which everybody that is a fan of EFR does. And so thanks, guys. I appreciate all of you, and it means the world to me to see you here. So thank you. So Jack, what's been happening? We've had an eventful year. And in fact, since we started the organization, it has been, for me, one of the best experiences of my life. I definitely would have jumped off of the UFO train much, longer ago, because as people who listen to my show know, I have seen behind the veil on more than one occasion, and it's not attractive. It's not necessarily a pretty thing. And there are lots of grifters. There are lots of people that have some major issues, and there's not a lot of purity. There's not a lot of places that we can go to actually look at research or look at history that isn't viewed through the lens of somebody who believes in the topic. So I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I've known Erica several years now, and back when we first started talking about maybe taking our collaborations to another level, maybe getting a little more serious, then I had been contacting her about helping with blog posts, and she had me on her show a few times, and we kind of upped that quite a bit with expanding frontiers research. And we had been talking about it and wanting to focus on things that we can actually, a term I often use is sink our teeth into. There's just so many, what I call fish tales that, as some UFO report in 1952 or whenever got told to someone, that told it to a researcher, that put it in a book, that put it in a movie, and so on and so forth, that it's kind of hard to identify what, if anything, really even happened in the beginning. And so one of the things that I was interested in was putting what we could get under a glass, and taking looks at it through the FOIA process, through public records requests. And one of the people that I felt provided some mentorship to me and the UFO community in this regard was James Carrion, who does what we might call historic forensic research. And what we're really talking about is just separating he said, she said from what you can actually demonstrate to be true. And I'm here to tell you there ain't a whole lot of meat on those bones when it comes down to it. But be that as it may, what Erica and I would like to do tonight is look back at some blog posts that we've done since we incorporated in mid 2022. Some maybe we'll look at some video clips that were particularly popular. We had so many of you folks that contributed or collaborated with blog posts and with video clips and agreed to be guests on the show and contributed material to what became our online UFO archive that took Erica's memorabilia and records that she keeps there in Salt Lake and just, took that to another level. And we'll be looking at that. We'll make some pleas for funding as we talk tonight. If you would be so generous, we would appreciate it if you would go to our website, expandingfrontiersresearch.org, and click on the secure PayPal button and make a donation to whatever you're comfortable with. If you find our work to be interesting and valuable to you, we'd appreciate it. And thanks for being here. Thanks for tuning in. And we really appreciate all of you guys.
We do, and thank you. And I want to thank the people who have donated to Expanding Frontiers. Michael Reynolds has been generous. There have been other people that have been generous and shown their support, and we really do appreciate that. I think that the thing that people sometimes don't understand is the fact that there are a lot of expenses that go into starting a nonprofit and then maintaining that nonprofit. And not only that, but with the website, with storing information, with acquiring archives or files and things like that. I mean, and then doing the FOIA requests. I mean, there are a lot of moving parts. It is just like running a business, except it's a nonprofit. There are a lot of behind the scenes expenses that you have to pay to get it going and to keep it functional. And so right now, you and I both, Jack, have this has been an out of our pocket thing. And we're really hoping to, in the next year, to receive some grant funding, and then to also get more donations coming in, so we can continue to do our work and to see the work at least cutting costs and hopefully more, so we can keep it going.
Yeah. So some people might naturally wonder, so why incorporate? And that's a good question. And there's a few different answers to that Erica's alluding to here. One is, if you've been riding the UFO trail for years and you've been doing UFO classified for years, you might as well incorporate a nonprofit so that what money the board members put into the nonprofit, what expenses they pay, stand to be tax deductible, as well as the people that contribute to your research and help you keep your websites and your blogs going, are also enjoying tax deductions for the money they contribute. And as Erica mentioned, the nonprofit aspect makes you eligible to solicit funding from federal and regional agencies that provide grants for various type of work to nonprofits that we have also been pursuing. So that's why we would do it. And then, yes, there are business licenses to keep paid and things like this. We have some really interesting FOIA requests, interesting to me, that are outstanding. Just to give you an idea.
And really quickly, before you go into that, I just want to say thank you, Lawrence Mail, for donating to Expanding Frontiers. I just popped into the PayPal, and that's very, very nice of you. That gets the show started off in a good, positive way.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lawrence. We appreciate that tremendously. Yeah, the way that the sausage is made, so to speak. People will ask Erica and I when we're interviewed, like how this works, and it's kind of started by me watching her show all the time, and I started submitting FOIA requests about things she and her guests were talking about. And sometimes, naturally, I would contact her about this and ask a little more about a story or tell her what I was getting and things like that. And so that kind of grew to where we'll talk a lot and she'll say, hey, I was thinking this might be a good thing to research. And then I'll see if I can figure out what agency might be a good target for a FOIA request. For example, we do a lot with the FBI. That's one of my favorite places because they're relatively transparent as these things go. If a person is deceased, and you can demonstrate that. There are some stipulations, but in general, they'll give you the files or not if they have um, a deceased person's records, and unless there is some particular reason that it's overly sensitive, they tend to release the records on a deceased person. So that's one of my favorites. But then the more that Erica and I got into some of these goings ons in Utah, like with the Many One Corporation and variations of that corporation, and that was a Joseph Firmage brainchild and some of his associates, it became apparent that in addition to the FBI, we might want to also submit FOIA requests to financial agencies like the Securities and Exchange Commission and various consumer protection bureaus, things like that. And we found out pretty quickly that there can be a lot of records. When the SEC does an investigation on something like Many One, they can come up with dozens and dozens of bankers' boxes of records. And this translates into thousands of digital files if you want them to process it for the Freedom of Information Act. And so we began negotiating these things with the SEC. And by negotiating, I mean, oftentimes a FOIA clerk will work with you and let you know that, okay, it's going to cost you this much an hour and it's going to cost you this much per document. And it's going to take years. Like I have some requests into the FBI that the estimated times are like 6-7 years out, that are just thousands of pages. And in circumstances like that, we will negotiate it down to perhaps seek just interviews that were made during this investigation, any finalized reports, any letters of action or informing the subject of the investigation that there would be no action. And so while that minimizes our expense, sometimes we're even able to get a fee waiver when we can convince the agency that it would be of interest to the public for them to release these records. There's still going to be a certain amount of expense involved. And also, I mean, it deserves consideration that there's a lot of records still in some of these vaults about Many One, about, just off the top of my head here, I can tell you too, that Erica came up with the idea to let's look in a little closer into some of these cults. And there's one in Colorado that will eventually be presenting what we've learned about, that there were some 800 something pages of FBI records stored at the National Archives that they wanted years. I think it was like 39 months of projected time of processing and $600 or so to do that. And we negotiated that down to we could get it within we could get them to work on it immediately in the next tier if we would do it under 30 pages, and then they did that for like $20. So that's often what we do. And the FOIA clerk will help us select. They'll give us some ideas of what some of these documents are labeled or what they may be. But again, here, see, we shelled out the $20 for the 27 pages, and we'll do a story and we'll pull together some comments from relevant people and whatnot. But that's still 675 or 575 pages, or what, 800 pages roughly of material still out there on this group that we can kind of estimate what some of it is. But there's a lot of material out there that is getting skimmed over, that's eventually going to be shredded and disposed of on the things you've seen us reporting on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to just say it's been interesting. I've, spent the past couple of days, really digging into how media outlets do FOIAs, some of the responses they've come up with, different researchers and authors of books who have used the FOIA process, and they've had, just some starts and stops as we have, but they've really uncovered things that are, important to not only people here in the United States, but people, things that are going place, with different countries with regard to the United States. And it is a really important tool that we have at our disposal to make sure that there is a level of transparency. And as we know, sometimes getting transparency from the government, whether it's federal or local, state government, that can be very tricky, especially if you have people that have things that they're trying to obfuscate from the public, as we have seen, case in point, what's taking place with Uintah County and Phenomicon. And so these are really interesting things. I watched a story that Washington Post did about FOIA requests, and they had their FOIA guy, and then they had a couple reporters on there, and they said that, they showed the right way, as we have with EFR and our video about FOIA requests, but they showed, like the way to do your FOIA requests and the process, the steps that you painstakingly go through to make sure that you're going back and forth. It's not a process that you can just do one time, make a request, and then it's going to be done. You have to keep pursuing and making sure that these requests come through. A lot of times when, there is, we have, like with Uintah County, they're saying that they have how many more records now, and that it's subject to, all these additional fees. And then you're going to eventually now, go to mediation with Utah and Uintah County. And then the next level for that is going to the State Records Committee for a hearing between Uintah County and, Expanding Frontiers Research for information that should be publicly available. So we'll see what goes on with that, but it's quite a process.
Yeah, and that Phenomicon case is one of the things that we're making a plea for funding for tonight. It's a rather complex series of circumstances that we'll lay out in detail eventually in a blog post. But essentially, what happened here is that as we've done in the past, we requested all the records pertaining to Phenomicon for 2023. and it got a little convoluted, and they only produced like 3 pages of records. And so we appealed that to their chief officer in Uintah County. And then we actually had a couple of requests pertaining to Phenomicon. And then the appeal resulted in them giving us another 140 pages of records that had been initially withheld. But then we appealed the appeal because we feel like some things are redacted on these many pages, dozens of pages that they gave us, that the Utah Freedom of Information Act is called the GRAMA. It's about records access. And the Utah GRAMA specifically states that the public has a right to know how the government is conducting its business. And so we are essentially arguing about the appeal that the things that are withheld are not exempt from disclosure under the GRAMA. And so now that's going to mediation. Then in another case, to Vernal City, we made a request. That's the town that actually holds Phenomicon. And those of you that read our stories from last year are aware that we got some comment from people like the Vernal City manager. And we made a GRAMA request to the city recorder to give us copies of any emails that contained the term Phenomicon from the city manager to the city manager or from the city manager, as well as 2 or 3 other terms. And the city recorder informed us that she estimated about 100 pages of responsive records and quoted us a fee of, I believe it was $218 for her office to process and produce that. So we filed a appeal of the fee and never heard back on it, and made a couple of inquiries about it, and those went without response, which means that you're not going to get the fee waived. As far as the technicalities of the GRAMA, if you receive no response, that means your appeal was denied. Yet we continued to make the city recorder's office aware that we wanted that material processed. And we now have run into, it's been, I believe it's been about 60 days since they made us aware of the estimated responsive records that they have not produced. So we will see where that goes in the new year. But that's one of the things that we are making pleas for as well, is that expense that may be incurred to the Vernal City Recorder's Office.
Right. And I think, and to go back for people that are watching this show, excuse me, that don't really understand, they're thinking that we're talking about UFOs, and this does relate to that because this was a conference. This is a conference that they're doing up in Vernal, Utah, with the cast and from Skinwalker Ranch, from the History Channel show. And we did an initial report, and we exposed the fact that they were actually losing money, taxpayer money, on the show, and they continue to keep losing money. But even more fantastic to me, to you, to most people, to Nate Carlisle from Fox 13, there are things that aren't accounted for in their in the records that they're sending us, like the event center. That is a huge event center. How much does that cost? They're getting it for free. There are lots of unanswered questions as to why Utah, the Travel and Tourism Board, would pay for a conference that is promoting absolute garbage. Not only that, but they're, I mean, they're not giving themselves an out, which they never have done with the skinwalker nonsense. But if they could say this is a potential, but they're living and kind of dying on this cross of absolutely promoting garbage that is harmful. And at the end of the day, when you look at the pictures of the crowd size, I mean, it's not as big as they like to pretend it is, and yet there's no accounting for how many tickets were sold. I mean, there's so many questions that are there, and I think these are the important things that you and I do that other people can benefit from, because we're showing people ways that the UFO world can be used to grift for money. And then you get government involved, and then you've got all sorts of other things that open up. And in my opinion, this and the crypto stories that we've done, specifically about Safe Moon, and also some of the communications between Spencer Governor Cox and some of these far right neo-Nazi people in the tech industry in Silicon Valley, or Silicon Slopes. I mean, these are all things that we've been working on that all have connecting points. And so it is fascinating when you can get documents that you should be able to access, to put the pieces together and then to expose a larger picture to the public. This is critical. I mean, this is why our work is very important for multiple reasons.
Yes, and this kind of segues us into, we might as well try a clip here and see if we can pull it up. One of the things that concerned me about the whole Phenomicon story was a lack of transparency on how the people are selected as speakers and how their pay is selected. And a lot of you have read our blog posts on that and have viewed Nate Carlisle at Fox 13's story on it and have seen our videos on it. And when we asked online about some of the things that you guys appreciated the most, this was one that came up. And I'll see here. If I can pull this up, I spoke with Thomas Winterton about his involvement with the organizing committee, and asked him if just how that worked, how these people are paid and all. And here's what he had to say about it.
Do you need me to pull up the clip?
The clip's not playing?
No, I think, have you done the share your screen? Jack and I are, this is.
Yeah, let's try this again.
Okay.
Let's see if I can get it here. Okay, let's go. See it now?
Yep, and then just add to the stage. There you go.
The Bernal City manager, Binion, mentioned to me in an email, as was documented in the previous article, that he was part of an organizing committee for Phenomicon, and that this organizing committee decided the speakers and the amounts of compensation paid to the speakers. Were you part of that organizing committee?
I am, and I'm very proud to be part of it. I will say that in planning this for the first time, this is a first of its kind in Uinta County. I offered them comparisons as to what had been paid to us in other conferences that we have attended, but I did not ask for a specific amount, nor did I have anything to do with my compensation or the rest of the team.
So that's what Thomas had to say about that.
Right, and the rest of the interview is quite exciting too. You did a great job on that.
Well, thank you. He showed it. He adamantly stated that he did not feel there was any conflict of interest involved in him being on the organizing committee, or as we've talked about on a number of shows, that we just we don't really understand how they decide who gets paid $5,000 for hanging out for the weekend and who has to pay to be a vendor. Seems a little iffy when you're on the organizing committee of the event.
You know,
with with to be completely clear, tax money paying these people.
when you know what's really interesting, and I think this just goes to show that here in Utah, we don't really understand the concept of, conflict of interest. And nothing could scream that louder than the latest news about Tim Ballard and our Attorney General Sean Reyes. And for those of you who don't know, this is quite the story, and it will continue. The dominoes will fall, and we'll see when and if a certain Skinwalker Ranch owner gets pulled into this, since he is friends with these people. But you have Tim Ballard, who was the operation or the manager, the person that started Operation Underground Railroad, which was allegedly a child sex trafficking organization, anti-child sex trafficking, and they were going on all these raids to foreign countries with the Attorney General from Utah, and they did a big screening of their movie Sound of Freedom with Donald Trump, and so on and so on. And then you have Operation Underground Railroad donating a substantial amount to the Attorney General's office. Adam Herbets from Fox News just did a piece on this, I think, a couple nights ago, and in that piece, he is saying that that millions of dollars went to the Attorney General, which the Attorney General dispersed to different law enforcement agencies across Utah. So the conflict of interest there is just overwhelming. And again, that goes to show that these types of things are taking place, I think, very frequently in Utah. And these are things that I'm really proud of our work at Expanding Frontiers, because we're showing that and we're proving that through the records requests that we're getting, through statements that we're getting from some of these figures. And at some point in time, there will be more to come on all of these fronts. So I just want to say, great job, Jack. And I wanted to throw the Tim Ballard, Attorney General Sean Reyes thing in there, the Bling and Bishop, because I think that goes to show the kind of caliber of people we have leading Utah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I see Tom in chat. Hey, buddy, thanks for stopping by. Again, Lawrence, thank you. We see you've got to move on. Ken, good to see you here. Thanks for being here, everybody. I've got to say, Erica, that my experience with dealing with the Travel and Tourism Office in Uintah County, the clerk office, dealing with Vernal City Recorder, I do not think that I'll put it this way. I get a very strong indication that the Uintah County does not value and respect the GRAMA process. And I don't hold the director of tourism personally responsible for that. I think it comes from Salt Lake City. I think it trickles down out through the communities. And from the governor's office down, I think that that's how you end up with this culture that just don't answer the guy. He'll go away,
Right.
That they're not trained. I mean, they are. I've got my doubts how many of them understand their public servants. Like, I don't know if they even view that as their job when they go to work in the morning. And that's not a person's responsibility that got hired and didn't get educated about the GRAMA process and what it's their responsibility to do when emails are requested, when public records, public contracts is one of the things we're talking about here that is under appeal, that Uinta County is trying to obstruct us, the public, from informing you what the conditions and terms are of contracts that were paid for services and talent rendered at Phenomicon. I mean, the GRAMA clearly states that that is not, services rendered for payment from the county are not exempt from disclosure. I mean, that's what the Public Records Acts are for. And so it does really tie in that Mr. Winterton sees no conflict of interest here, advantageously doesn't see a conflict of interest in him purportedly doing a scientific investigation while being on an entertainment show and getting paid to promote something as a tourism angle, that if this scientific investigation finds reasonable explanations, there's nothing to be on TV about. It's a classic conflict of interest. And I'll see if I can pull this clip up here about what he said when I asked him about the conflict of interest.
Yes, and while you pull that up, I just have to say, if you can go to expandingfrontiersresearch.org and watch the whole interview, I would recommend it. It's fantastic.
Thank you. Giving you the benefit of the doubt that all of that is absolutely correct. Government enabling stories about dogmen at ranches in order to get that tourism.
How is that any difference from them? The county also puts on
the
energy summit.
No.
Hang on.
You don't.
No, I see zero conflict. That's no different than these counties that pay on a regular basis, bring in paid speakers to speak at conference. One example, the energy conference over at over in Vernal.
I don't
they
find
bring in
that
speakers
remotely comparable, but I understand your argument.
Yes, so that is a very interesting statement. And when you go, and it would be interesting to find out, and perhaps this could be another thing that we could do a records request for, to find out some of the other speakers' fees for conferences like the energy conferences that they're putting on, to see what a baseline for speakers that they're bringing in is, because I would be willing to bet it's much, much lower for people that are actually doing real work to come in and to speak to audiences.
And if they actually factor in, if they have to pay for a facility, if they have to pay for the work that travel and tourism and county employees do, that would alter the bottom line, that they're factoring in a way that makes it seem like that's just free labor and facilities and stuff. Yeah.
Right. And, also, I just think there's so many questions about this to begin with that we've talked about, many times over the year. I mean, just to promote things that are potentially having a harmful effect can be very disturbing for somebody that has, suffering from mental illness. I mean, there's so many aspects to this. It's not like they're promoting something that's love and light. This is something that's very dark and destructive and potentially cancerous and follows you home and all of these things. And it really is, in my opinion, pretty, despicable that they would be tapping into and taking advantage of A, vulnerable people, and B, not being truthful about how many people are actually there and the revenue that they're generating. I mean, these are all questions that should be readily available through records requests. And so we'll keep doing what we're doing with the grandma process, and then we'll make sure that we let you know how things pan out as Jack goes to the records committee, does mediation, and then goes to the record hearing, which is the final process in this step to obtain these records.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a number of other things that we have literally, I'd say, dozens of outstanding FOIA requests that are being worked on. A smaller amount we're actually going to owe fees. And the way a lot of this works too, like when I said I was awaiting some requests that were thousands of pages, you aren't committed to pay thousands of dollars to get an 8,000 page file sent to you. You can just request to have it processed, and then then there's a cost to you if you want what's called a reproduction, and that includes a PDF, PDF or hard copy. And so it always seemed to me that the first step is to tell them, go ahead and process it and make it published. Then maybe we'll have one of our guys like Paul Carr that's in the College Park area run by and just take a look at it or something, maybe snap some shots on his phone or something. But the point being, you got to get it processed first. And another thing, an area that Erica and I shared an interest was the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. And as many of you know, I wrote a book on the intersection of NICAP and the intelligence community, or the IC. And that was one of the things, as I mentioned earlier, that Erica and I somewhat collaborated on. She gave me some help with that and pointing me in certain directions. And in the last few months, another thing that came up was she had said, I really think there's more to Goldwater. I think Barry Goldwater is interesting. And a lot of people have pulled the Goldwater files, but I said, okay, of course I pulled his files when I wrote the book, but I said, let's try this again. And like Erica said, there's different things that can happen. And you submit a FOIA request, and then the more experienced you get with it, this wider flow chart you get of, okay, they're either going to say they have nothing, or they're going to tell you they have something, and then they're going to tell you conditions of how you can get it and how long it's going to take. And then when they produce it, I can step A, B, C, D, E, F, and almost always there's something you can appeal, or you can say, are you sure that's all you got? I'll give a shout out to John Greenwald over at the Black Vault. He taught me that one. Right when they give you the records, you resubmit. I know this just sounds nutty, but you resubmit another request, same request, and say, I want everything not included in that release. And a high percentage of the time they give you more records, which still blows my mind that it's like, oh, you meant you want everything on Goldwater when you asked for everything on Goldwater. And there's this flow chart, and we followed it, and all the way to finding out that there are, I'll check my notes here so I'll know, 90 pages of FBI records in the custody of the National Archives responsive to Barry Goldwater, and they have apparently never been processed before. And so those are estimated to be available in February 2026, and that's going to be a cost of about $72 for a reproduction, which will ask for a PDF. And these are the kinds of things that we get. Now, you can go to our blog and see our post on Barry Goldwater and access all the records that have been released thus far. There's hundreds of pages, so if you find anything particularly interesting in there, please do give us a shout out, because there's a good chance that someone may not have read it or seen it in the light that you saw it, because there's an art to reading these files too, because if you're doing it at 11 o'clock at night after a long day, there's a good chance you're not going to absorb the nuances and the things that you might, if you carefully read them several times over a period of time. They're often just a black and white wall of text, and you'll as you study these things, you'll find names that loop back around, and you'll be like, oh, so that's what this was about, and things like that. For instance, wanted to stay on the NICAP topic for a moment. One of the things I'm very much looking forward to, that was supposed to be processed and released back in November of 2022, but I'm still awaiting it, are 200 pages of FBI records in the care of NARA, the National Archives, on Nicholas de Roquefort. And those of you who read Wayward Sons are familiar with who that is. He was in all reasonable likelihood a CIA asset who helped organize and launch NICAP. And they're going to want $160 for those records, which could literally come any day. I mean,
and just explain, because Jack, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think there are people that listen to the show for the first time or are new to the UFO field, and they really don't understand who NICAP is. So if you can just give us a brief rundown on the origins of NICAP, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Sure. The National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena was the largest civilian group ever assembled, UFO organization. At its height, they had some 14,000 subscribers. It was a really interesting business plan that for a few dollars a year, a couple bucks a month, you would get mailers, or at least you were supposed to. They were always behind on them. But you would get kept in the loop about what the investigation team was learning. And they were a Washington-based committee, and then they branched out to have subcommittees to do different projects, and by geographic location, Brooklyn, Florida, California, different spots. And I really admired the way they raised funds theoretically. They had a really smart business plan. They just didn't follow it. And I think one of the reasons they didn't is because I think the group was designed by the CIA and the State Department, probably for fundraising and funneling funds and things like that. And the initial director had a lot of, his name was T. Townsend Brown, and he had a lot of contacts in the State Department and adjacent to the State Department, and was in the act of trying to obtain funding himself for some weapons research and development. And in my book, I go into the different cast of characters and who can conclusively be associated with the CIA, and how it played out, and the things that the CIA, a former CIA director that was a board member with NICAP, knew that are not talked about commonly, that my research showed that the organization that helped Townsend Brown incorporate NICAP had at one point been subcontracted by an agency that was a funding conduit for the CIA, and that worked with the CIA, gathered information for the CIA. And I have letters to that effect that I obtained from the CIA that are cited in the book. And that's among some other material I'm awaiting. Interestingly enough, following that flow chart, I discovered that there are a few dozen pages on responsive to Sidney Gottlieb that have not yet been processed and released under the FOIA. They're FBI records in the custody of NARA. And in Wayward Sons, I suggested that more researchers might consider investigating the CIA through the FBI.
Right. And really quickly again, so for people that don't understand who Sidney Gottlieb was and the importance he played with MK Ultra, can you just give us a little rundown on his illustrious and questionable life?
Sidney Gottlieb was a chemist that was the project director of MK Ultra, which was about behavior modification, and it grew out of Project Artichoke, and Project Bluebird were its predecessors, which interestingly was green lighted by Hillenkoetter, who ended up on the NICAP board.
Right.
And we got a blog post about how Hillenkoetter probably helped his legacy tremendously by jumping in the UFO pool and having all the UFO people carry him on their shoulders, rather than being known as the CIA director that initialized what turned into MK Ultra.
Right.
But Gottlieb was the director, and MK Ultra had some 140 or so sub projects that most of it got destroyed, and most of the records got destroyed. And we really don't know how far it went, but what we do know is pretty ghastly, and human life was certainly considered expendable.
It's very shocking just to hear what went on. The little that we know that will see the light of the day in public, but
yes, and so those are some things too. Records on Gottlieb, records on DeRoche that we're awaiting, that there's going to be a fee for a reproduction. Records on Barry Goldwater, who I guess I should mention too, many people don't know he was a board member of NICAP as well at one point. So that we're digging into a lot, waiting on a lot, and we really appreciate it if you would go to expandingfrontiersresearch.org, click on our secure PayPal link, the orange button that says donate, and do whatever you're comfortable with, and we'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the thing, and like we mentioned at the beginning of the show, I mean, we are right now, we've received donations, and we are grateful for people that donate. So thank you very much. But we are still in the red in a big way, and we need to have funding, to continue doing the work that we're doing, and our work is important for a multitude of reasons. So like Jack says, please go to expandingfrontiersresearch.org and donate what you can to help the organization in 2024 obtain FOIA requests, do more investigative work, and then put more information out to the public that needs to be seen.
Yes, thank you. And how about another clip?
Let's do it.
Clip? Here's one about what a woman that is near and dear to our hearts has to say about, she interviewed Erica, and here is what Vanessa Valilko has had to say about Erica and the organization.
I just fell in love with the way that she talked about very candidly, very openly about her experiences in the UFO community, and also how dangerous it can be for people who are vulnerable, because there are grifters and abusers and they don't get called out. And then when she calls people out, she doesn't get supported. There's this conspiracy of silence. And so we had an incredible conversation talking about, again, about grifters in the UFO community, but also more serious issues like domestic violence. And the episode was also just full of a lot of laughter and sass, because we both get very heated, because we both want to protect the people in our communities, especially those who are more vulnerable.
That's a really nice comment. I think the world of Vanessa, and I have to say that I really appreciate the show that you both did together on domestic violence and supporting victims of domestic violence. So thank you both for doing that, and I appreciate Vanessa for the nice comments. It is important to note, as she said, that people who do try to speak out about different things in the UFO world are definitely harassed, and it's a really serious thing. People who are isolated, it's not a good place for them to be in. And we've seen this repeatedly over and over again, especially with people like Luis Elizondo and his group of people that he has handled, groomed, and allegedly led out there to go on social media and harass people who are asking questions, or trying to hold people accountable for statements that they're making that can't be factually verified. So this is an ugly place, and that's why it's important to have a sense of community, and that's why it's also important for everyone to speak up when they see things like this going on, because silence is not a way to make a change. And in fact, it can be dangerous when we continue to be silent and we don't take a stand and do the right thing. So I will say, if you see that happening in the UFO sphere, on Twitter, wherever, make sure that you stand up, make sure that you do your part to report harassment and doxing. So thank you for letting me just state that.
Yeah, absolutely. These things are important. I met Vanessa a few years ago because we had a mutual friend, Shell, and I will always appreciate the role that Shell played in this. They invited me to be on their podcast, and I said, yeah, sure. And I said, well, let's see what kind of stuff they're talking about. So I just picked up their last show to see where their head was at and where they were going and stuff. And it happened to be Vanessa. And so I had like looked her up on Twitter, and I was like, wow, this is really interesting. You're like just speaking my language about so much of the content. And so then I started following her Personal Pans podcast and annual online virtual conference and things like that she does, where you've been a guest now and things like that. And she was just really interesting to me, and that she's so tolerant of people and just live and let live. And, like if you can listen to where people are coming from, you can get a feel for, if I was you with your life, I'd be doing what you're doing, kind of somewhat of a philosophy. And so with that, I learned that she also has a bachelor's in science in sociology, which made her a qualified expert on domestic violence and various social issues that we have explored and are important and have played a role in Erica's life. So Vanessa agreed to speak with me about some of these things, and we did a couple of half-hour segments on that, and a half hour or so. And Vanessa had worked when she attended DePaul University in Chicago. She worked on the assessment of the Cook County, Illinois domestic violence program. And so she had a lot of good information and insight to give us. And if these are important things to you, I would really recommend finding those videos on our video page at expandingfrontiers.org. She's very knowledgeable, insightful on these things. And I'm going to share another, just one clip here of the many things she said that explain why these issues should be and are important to all of us, not just victims of domestic violence or those in the court system.
There was an article in a journal called Injury Epidemiology in 2021, and they were looking at mass shootings between 2014 and 2019 to see the correlation with mass shooters and domestic violence. And they found that the role of domestic violence in fatal mass shootings, and that's 4 or more people who were murdered in the United States, they found that 59.1% of mass shootings were domestic violence related. And in 68.2% of mass shootings, the perpetrator either killed at least one partner or family member or had a history of domestic violence. So this is a systemic issue that ultimately affects all of us. It's not just a partner, it's not just a couple or private affair, a relationship level. This, once it explodes, spills over and creates terror for everyone.
Yeah, thank you for playing that. I want to just say, if people are out there listening to the show and they're wondering what relation this has to anything, well, first of all, we're exploring different topics in Expanding Frontiers Research, our organization, our nonprofit organization, topics that are important not only to me, especially because that domestic violence piece hits all too unfortunately close to home, but to most people. Most people are either know somebody or involved with domestic violence. And when you have, especially in the UFO conspiracy culture, you have a tendency for people to become victimized. And so these are things that we need to be aware of, and we need to understand, how these things work and what to look for in signs and for our loved ones and for people who are involved in our community.
Yeah, absolutely. And your donations help, again, us fund our website. They help us produce these videos. We'd like to explore this kind of content further with qualified experts like Vanessa, and go into projects in the arts, the humanities, and other things that we put qualified personnel together to conduct these projects, to execute, and to assist with what might turn into a number of topics such as this.
Right. Absolutely. So thank you for that interview with her. I appreciate it on multiple fronts.
I know. Thank you. We appreciate you too. Here's what let's take another look at what some other folks had to say about Expanding Frontiers research. And we have just had so many great people that were so appreciative that all of you are willing to come on and speak with us and spend your time, that we just really appreciate it.
You are accomplishing good things, especially with you and Jack are doing with Expanding Frontiers. Again, even if you're just reaching a couple people, out of the masses. Just a couple, you've reached me, and you help.
We really appreciate that. Thank you. And again, we appreciate all of you guys. Vancouver guy, we appreciate the help you've given and being in chat. The Earth has been on and talked about important social issues. All of you guys,
Simon
thank you.
And Drew, I will reach out to you later because we do have other ways to donate other than PayPal. So thank you very much.
Yes, if you have particular ways you would like to do something, you can certainly reach us, and we can work out what's important to you. As Coach Prime says, I ain't hard to find.
We know where to find you, Jack.
Yeah. Please do let us know. Reach out to Erica. Let her know how you would like to do something and do something to help us along and to help our causes. But those are some of the different things that we are anticipating through the FOIA. Another one, this one's back to NICAP as well. We're awaiting 127 pages of FBI records that are in the custody of the National Archives, responsive to a man named Carlton William Alsop. And he worked in the CIA Office of Policy Coordination, and he was on the Psy warfare crew that was put together by Colonel Joseph Bryan III back in the early 1950s. And Colonel Bryan went on with his boss, Roscoe Hillenkoetter, to be on the board of governors of the NICAP. And those 127 pages on Mr. Alsop are estimated to be available in June 2025 at a cost of about $100. And that just gives you an idea of the kinds of things we're requesting. And NARA will tell you, okay, it's going to take 39 months. It's going to take 24 months. It's going to take 48 months. This is a long game to play. And I do it. We do it because you might as well. I mean, I've spent, 12, 14 years writing blog posts. I might as well have FOIA requests pending for 5 or 6 years. Why not? I mean,
well, that's our right. This is something that a lot of people don't know is available to them. And I'll just go back to the domestic violence issue. I think domestic violence survivors don't understand that you can do grammar requests for information. You have that right as a victim to get your information from police departments to see how investigations went or what was going on behind the scenes. And so people have that ability to make records requests that can provide transparency. And I think it's really critical to know that we have that ability, that we all have that power. I mean, this is a very empowering thing. And it is interesting over the years. And Jack, I just have to ask you this before you continue. I'm sorry to throw you off there, but when, talk a little bit about the way the FOIA process started and some of the hindrances and through different people that, different people in political office and how information has been easier to gain and then it's kind of getting pulled back again. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. You mean like in Utah or?
I mean, for FOIA requests, how?
Yeah. Well, the John Mark story alone, I mean, we could do a whole show on. Speaking of MK Ultra and all, that's just a fascinating story that he had seen some things in the newspaper and there had been some stuff on TV about the CIA had been funding research at various universities and things. And just one small line of it was something about the use of drugs for interrogation techniques. And nobody paid any attention to it except for John Marks. And pulling that thread is what unrolled the whole thing. And in his book, The Search for the Manchurian Candidate, he made a somewhat tongue-in-cheek remark about, I guess it was a slow news day or something when he sued the CIA, and everybody covered it. And it just was the perfect storm that it all came together right, that Sidney Gottlieb, and at that time the director of Central Intelligence, Richard Helms, had destroyed everything they thought they could find, is the story, and overlooked some financial records. And that is what years later the story goes that the CIA released after lawsuits to John Marks. And so pretty much everything we know that we can hold a document and say, here's where they recorded it, here's where they said it happened, here's how we know that Georgetown University had a wing to the medical center paid for by the CIA, that CIA officers had free run of using human patients as guinea pigs. We know that because of these records that John Marks got. And they have over the years gotten much more obstructive. There's some agencies that just have reputations for, it's State Department has a reputation among some people that I know that I think are more experienced at this than I. State Department has a reputation of, or Homeland Security, sorry, State, Homeland Security, I think it is, it has a reputation of being among the worst for dragging their feet, never, 8 years later, will write you and ask you, do you still want that request filled, things like that. Another thing they started doing, I don't know when they started it, but I believe it was in the Obama administration. It became apparent that they were using screen names in emails, like public elected officials and Obama appointees. And I'm talking high level people like attorney generals and stuff like that were, just, I'll make one up, like Captain Kirk or whatever would be what he was referred to or in emails or something, so that if you did FOIA all emails responsive to person A, then you're not going to get the emails if you don't know that their nickname in the Oval Office and on the server was, Jumpin' Jack Flash or whatever.
Oh, they're so sneaky.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just go back to a question that was asked. Do we have a guide about FOIAs and how to do requests? And we do have a video on the EFR website talking about FOIA.
Yeah, we do. And we're certainly available to help with that too. We collaborate with other researchers and are willing to help you file FOIA requests or file them for you under basically my name and Expanding Frontiers Research. And one of the reasons we kind of start that way is you probably want a PO box, and you probably want a phone number that you're not concerned about getting doxxed with, and not because of the CIA or the FBI, but lunatics in the UFO community that might wish you ill will. You might, if you don't want your personal information out there, the way to keep from that happening is don't ever give it to anybody. So and that includes police agencies and everybody else. We get requests filled that clearly some law enforcement agencies aren't required to redact personal identifiable information. And then we're going to have to make decisions about if we're going to post these records in full or just write about them. I'm really a stickler though for I don't respect journalists or writers or researchers that write about a document they don't post and make available for people. And frankly, I was considering touching base with some professional journalists about how they feel about that when law enforcement agencies don't redact personal information in the records they give you that you want to do a story about. But as it relates to the FOIA, yeah, if it's just a one-time thing or a couple of things you're looking into, we'd be happy to submit those requests for you, so you don't need to rent a PO box or get a track phone or something like that. But if you do want to dive in, we highly encourage it, and we'll collaborate with you on that too. Get yourself a PO box and a template for FOIA requests and just start sending them off. You can do 3, 4, 10 a day right from your email.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, it is like you mentioned, it's kind of a slow process. It can be sometimes quick, it can be slow, but it is good, like for all of us to bounce ideas off of each other and then, put it out there and see what happens and what you get over time, because it does help connect the dots in a lot of ways. And even like you mentioned, just like somebody out there reading an article and seeing one line in an article that is questionable, that can give you ideas and things to do those FOIA requests on. And as I was mentioning earlier, there is an author, and I've got to just find his name really quickly, but he and I've been geeking out on his stuff, but he writes a lot about spies and the CIA and things, and he's done some really great work. And I'm so sorry I can't remember his name right off the bat, but he had mentioned in an interview I saw that had he not had FOIA, like he never would have been able to do the groundbreaking work that he's done. And it's just such a cool thing to do. So definitely, if you feel discouraged, keep it up, because it is well worth it in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, sometimes it's boom, boom, you get something right back. Other times it might take months or years. But after you've been at it a while, you pretty much start getting things pretty regularly from a while back, and you just kind of keep feeding that circle. We've gotten behind, but I feel like we're a little behind now in publishing material we've got, because it's not just, okay, here's the records, y'all can look at them. It's also, once we read them and see what they are, sometimes there's people we want to tap for comment. And then sometimes the records we get will lead to another FOIA request, where, like we had written in our work on Ramtha, that our initial request to the FBI for records responsive to Ramtha School of Enlightenment mentioned that the Thurston County Sheriff's Office was aware of the group. So that led to a request to the Thurston County Sheriff's Office, where dozens and dozens of records were responsive, and they've been sending us more records like every 30 days, pretty much since fall. And so we continue to sort these out. We did one post on them because we just wanted to share them and start getting them out. But this last one, it's really interesting. We're going to be coming up with this material soon and publishing more of it soon. And we paid some fees for this. You often do with law enforcement agencies as compared to federal agencies. They just will have flat fees per file for a search, things like that. And we paid some fees for this, and we'll be coming out with it probably. I'm certainly thinking January, if not within a week or two, where some things in these files interagency communications between the FBI and the Thurston County Sheriff's Department led to some interesting implications about Ramtha and people at the property. And it's not entirely clear who all's doing what. It makes it it substantiates suspicions a little more. Like I think all of us that know much of anything about Ramtha's following would have said it's not clear what all these people's agendas are that are in this mixed bag. And some of these records we're obtaining make that a little more clear. Something else I mentioned earlier, that in this series of requests that we did on cults, there's a group in Loveland, Colorado, at a place called the Sunrise Ranch that calls itself the Emissaries of Divine Light. And it is actually an old group. It's been different places than Colorado, and it's spread out, and it has a foothold now at this place in Loveland called Sunrise Ranch. And that just so happens to be the stomping grounds of Stan Romanek, of UFO alien abduction infamy. And the area has a history, so to speak. And that's one of them, that there are a lot of records that go back decades on this group that tie into the Chicago 7, that was a political story back in the 70s that has a lot of intrigue to it. And they got involved with the Emissaries of Divine Light. And most recently, this group had been conducting retreats. It has different teachers come that rent the property and bring their followings. And, it kind of depends on who you ask, if this is chasing spiritual enlightenment or exploiting people for to get at their money and to get their devotion, or exactly what's going on here. And like with any group like this, you tend to have people that will witness either way. Some that have filed complaints, some that have not filed complaints yet, possibly. And as I was saying, there are hundreds of FBI records available on this group. We negotiated that down to under 30 pages so that we could get it quickly and at a minimal fee of 20-something bucks. We also tapped the sheriff's office, the Larimer County Sheriff's Office, and they had dozens of calls to this property as well. And so and they were available for like about $8 per report. So we picked a selection of the ones that we thought might be the more interesting, instead of, ordering, a few $100s in reports. But the larger point here is there's still a lot of material available, and we'll eventually be sharing this and what stories seem to percolate up from these reports.
Well, and let's just, say too, and I'm really excited because I've been amazed at the volume of material that we've received with regard to Ramtha. It's very interesting and a lot to go through. But I think, what's important again, and kind of the common theme is, the cult-like behavior, how easy it is to manipulate people in the UFO community, in this health and wellness community, in any type of community where you're wanting to seek kind of a kinship, a kindred spirit with other people. And you have, even here in Utah, like with doTERRA and some of these herbal companies that are promoting these marvelous healing, oils and things like that. I mean, it's like people like this know how to identify weaknesses and play upon those. And then before you know it, you're enmeshed in a world, you're isolated from your family. You lose your life savings, and there are relationships that you can never get back. I mean, it's a really important topic to address, especially in our current state and society with QAnon and some of these cults that we're seeing that are really having a detrimental effect on people. And so, highlighting the cults, highlighting how people are recruited, highlighting the information that we're getting through FOIA requests is a very integral part of what we're doing at Expanding Frontiers Research. And I think that is, that's important for all of us to know.
Yes, it is. It is important. And
thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thanks everybody. We really appreciate the support and you being here. Thank you. Yeah, Erica, those are really good points. And one of the things we can discuss Ramtha and Emissaries of Divine Light hand in hand here, because it is kind of a thing that runs through. There are some common denominators you see here. And one of the things that happened there in the Loveland area was they used to have this music festival at Sunrise Ranch. And they increasingly got accused of using it to recruit new members into what critics called the cult, the Emissaries of Divine Light. And some people argued against it, and others said, look, if it's not just a something that encourages drug use and makes a population vulnerable to exploitation, then what's the problem? Just have it downtown at a performing arts center. What's the problem? And they eventually stopped giving the guy the license to have the music festival. So those kind of things carry weight to me, and there must have been some problems, and we can correlate with the police reports we're receiving and see that there were assaults and missing persons and things like this happening during these music festivals, burglaries, things like that.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I often wonder about like Burning Man. I just think, because I know people that go to Burning Man all the time, but it's just kind of grown into this huge cluster. And you look at things like that where people are going and they want to be like, just tap into that hippie side, the free side, again, like the new age and health and wellness communities. And these are, again, kind of, if people aren't aware, prime grounds for recruiting people that are vulnerable. I mean, it really is. There's so many things to think about in today's society, and we just are not. People, unfortunately, don't have that education. And I wish in our school curriculum, Lord, this will never happen with the rate we're going around here, especially in Utah, but to teach students discernment and critical thinking and how to understand when you get onto social media sites or when you're looking at websites, how to vet the information that you're getting. I mean, so here in Utah, we're trying to, our illustrious governor and attorney general have filed a lawsuit against TikTok and social media companies, and they're trying to prohibit anyone under 18 from accessing social media, which is just bonkers. It's very interesting to me. Instead of doing something like that, which is just another issue with what they're doing, they should be creating curriculums for students to teach people. How about spending some money that the state gets for funding and creating videos to teach that power of discernment, to teach people how to be smart, educated. It's just really interesting, and I think that that's important for both you and I. And I think that's why we both do, one of the reasons we do what we do with Expanding Frontiers. It's to empower people and to teach people how to have that discernment and to be safe in this environment.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And speaking of, let's go to another clip here. I'm just going to play it because I'm sure there'll be a lot of different directions we can go with discussion after I do. So I am just going to cue it up here. There were some, at that time, popular UFO forums that banned them from participating, among men who were talking about them and their cases. They were not allowed to have input on it. Yeah.
Wow, I wouldn't know anything about that, eh?
Right.
That's why I'm so passionate about having, having collaborating with Emma, because of experiences that I've had as a female on this subject, and just yeah, that means a lot for me as a woman to have Emma's things on the archive. I think it's really important. So, and I think at some point in time, like we've mentioned, it's like this goes back to who were the people on that list, who are the people that were harassing them, on in these forums, because I would wonder if some of the same people aren't the same people that are actively harassing people.
And
so
that, of course, was a discussion about Carol Rainey and Emma Woods. Yeah. Can I what?
Oh no, yeah, thank you. I was just going to say, can you talk a little bit more about that clip? Give us a little more. But and I also want to just give a shout out to Barry Greenwood, who was in that clip, who was also a part of Expanding Frontiers research. And you can go to our archive section and see some of the work that he has donated, some of the documents that he has graciously donated to Expanding Frontiers.
Yes, absolutely. Check out our archive, see materials that Emma is donating, see material Barry Greenwood has generously donated, among others. We have some of our FOIA stuff there, easy to scroll through and take a look at. But the Emma Woods case is disturbing by any definition. We explored it rather lengthily, Erica and I did, with Emma's help, and some shows that you can find that we had discussions with her. And Carol Rainey, who passed away this year, was a big champion of supporting Emma and Emma's right to speak up and have her say, even though it was she and Emma and Carol were both isolated and oppressed and outright banned from participating on various mailing lists. And at that time, email lists were popular, as were a few different community UFO forum message boards. And they were just banned from participating. while it's, it would be like an Onion story if it weren't so sick, while the old guard sorted it out and decided why the perpetrators weren't perpetrators.
Well, and the sad thing is these people are still given a forum. I mean, the fact that Dr. David Jacobs could even be given a platform, or some of these other people that have seen historically throughout the subject, who've been given a platform, even though they have criminal histories for some pretty despicable things. And we just look the other way because it's so easy to say, when you're in this cult, basically, that people they've been framed. And that was one of the things that I heard about Jan Harzan, who was the executive director of MUFON. And thank you, Scott, for the super sticker. And I really am going to come over and see you sometime soon. I promise. I need to go on vacation. But, Jan Harzan was the head executive director for many years of MUFON, which is the, Mutual UFO Network that has a presence throughout all over the globe. And he was busted soliciting an underage girl and was recently on trial. And I still need to find out what happened with that. But when the news went out that he was initially arrested and booked, the sentiment in the community was that he had been framed. And I just remember hearing that from a couple people that I actually quite like. And I just thought, are you kidding me? So there is a potential that somebody is really harming other human beings and committing acts that are illegal, to say the very least. And yet we're going to give them a pass because we're saying, weaving this miraculous tale of BS that this guy's been framed by the man. It's ridiculous. It's like the Bob Lazar story, always been framed. I mean, it's just like, come on, people, give me a break. There are a lot of people that have done things in this community that hide and have the help from people that are holding conferences, from other people that are high, up in the social strata of, this subject. And it's really disgusting. And I think that we need to, again, speak out a lot about this. And I know that the Jan Harzan thing, I think, or even the John Venturi thing about the blatant racism and the scandal that rocked MUFON a few years back. I mean, there was maybe 2 days where that was something that was talked about in the community, and then it was completely forgotten. And now it's just, whatever. And so I have to say that it is disappointing to see some people in this subject, and, Wendell Stevens, and I mean, just it's a sad sentiment that people are so willing to believe in something that they're not willing to understand that other people like Emma are being victimized.
Yes, and this is what's so important, like you so aptly pointed out, Erica, about learning critical thinking, understanding how facts are established. Are there conspiracies? Sure, there are. John Marks established one. He didn't sit around and think it up and write a book about it with no documents. And you have to establish it to be true. Okay, you're positing that Mr. Harzan was set up, whoever. Well, then you need to show how that's true, not just get everybody on board. There were some journalists in that community, Loveland, Colorado, that used to cover the city council meetings that I was following on Twitter, that were just insane when Romanik's crew would show up and were demanding that the city council do something about the UFO cover-up, and that Romanek was being framed by the government to be a sexual predator, and the things that he was charged with and eventually went to prison. It was just insane, the effect that he and some other people had on community members, that clearly became so indoctrinated, so under the ether, that there wasn't even a coherent line of thinking of what is the city council member supposed to do about this, even if you could prove it to be true. Like what are you even hoping happens? And that's to circle back to how we started this whole thing, that this whole show tonight. That's what Erica and I value and want to create more community of people we're willing to collaborate with that understand, yeah, a lot of things happen, but we have to establish what the difference between there a possibility or is a suspicion or an actual event through some type of documentation. And we very much welcome collaborations with people willing to do that kind of work. And we got a couple more clips here from some people doing stuff like that. You want to let's see them?
Let's do it.
All right. All right. Yes, this gentleman we were very happy to have on the show. He just covers all kinds of things that are of interest. Well, this is unfortunate. Here we go. Let's see if I can get it now.
Been so insidious and so subtle that you can have 2016 take place, and then the whole world breaks open, and it has just been outstanding. And not outstanding, but it's been remarkable. I mean, it's
been extraordinary to live through all this. I mean, and it's a real shift from what people kind of expect the world to have looked like and how they thought it worked. The world is actually working in kind of a different way now. And, I think that beyond just kind of the idea of like fact checking and like truth and, are newspaper articles correct? The thing that people really have to get into their heads, it's a total shift in mindset, is the flows of information and the effects that language has on people as an instrument. So it's really about what information does to people, how it makes them feel.
And I love, I first of all, I'm fascinated by Dave Troy. I think I follow him on Twitter. He has been very important for me. So I definitely would recommend, if you dare to get on Twitter, to follow him. And if you don't, which I don't blame you, make sure you go to Expanding Frontiers Research and watch our interview and see more about him. But he's an investigative journalist that lives in Baltimore, Maryland, and has done quite a bit on studying social structures and the decline in social structures thanks to social media and social programming. So can you give us a little bit more information on Dave as well?
Yeah. He was gracious and generous enough to provide comment as well on our blog post following the money that we did about the connection between cryptocurrency and people who promote very questionable UFO tales. And I knew I could count on him if he was willing to comment, which he fortunately was. I knew that he would know the history of the ties between as I think you and I spoke with Tim Banal some about when we were on his show, that you'd think people would be a little more alert to it if people are selling stories about men in flying saucers, that you might want to keep your hand on your wallet in a crowd. There might be pickpockets around here, metaphorically. You'd think they'd be a little more hip to that than they are. But as I was just discussing, the trust and the ether people got under with Stan Romanek, they become very vulnerable to the suggestions of these people that somehow it flips into believing these are the only trustworthy people. And it just it starts to work from the inside out that everyone else is lying to us except the guy that knows about the men in the flying saucers and knows how we're going to make a lot of money out of nothing.
I just want to say too, I have been, just kind of watching an alarming trend on YouTube and in social media. I mean, there are all sorts of, people that are coming out with specific videos. Jordan Peterson is a prime example of somebody who I just think is a red alert times 20. But you've got people that have really slickly produced videos that have, all of a sudden they go from 0 to 1 million followers, and this person is on their show and that. And we've seen that with some people in the UFO conspiracy theory with Eric Weinstein and Hal Puthoff and people like that. And so you see them also promoting kind of that social messaging, and then that can slip into other avenues. And people have to be really aware of how, a lot of these people, if you're listening to the keywords, the phrases that they're saying, they're all related. This is all, in my opinion, a very coordinated movement that has a lot of money behind it from specific people with with a lot of agendas politically. And, I want to go back to, because I harp on this a lot, but if people think that Robert Bigelow was mining data to look for UFOs, they're freaking up in the night. That guy was mining data to figure out how to, steer people's sentiments, how to tap into like Cambridge Analytica. And interestingly enough, Cambridge Analytica, which pretty much blew up the 2016 election by promoting conspiracy theories. And there is a company in Utah called Qualtrics that was doing the the tests on Facebook and social media. Hey, why don't you take this little profile test? We can find out about you. They would take that data and then bam, goes to Cambridge Analytica, and then goes to a specific person or people with political motivations. And then the next thing you know, all hell breaks loose. And so people have to be aware that that data that you're putting out there, and I don't know why I'm sorry to go off on this tangent, but it's just important to me. Like when you go onto a Facebook group, when you are on UFO Twitter, when you are doing all these things, your data is being mined, and it has nothing to do with UFOs. It has to do with steering a sentiment, going onto YouTube and typing in a specific thing. Obviously, we know with the algorithms, it's like you're just getting this constant feedback, this loop that can have a very detrimental effect. And so I just want to throw that out there, because again, that's something that I'm seeing that is becoming more and more alarming to me. We just don't know enough about that. And that's why we have brought on people like Troy to the show, why we brought on Ernie Piper to talk about crypto and to talk about some of these other ways that people can be manipulated. Expanding Frontiers Research over the past year has brought on consistently guests, and you've done blogs on people that have a lot of important things to say if everybody would just listen.
Absolutely. And it is all related. We knew we could count on Dave Troy to know about the marriage between people who distrust the government because they're hiding UFO secrets is going to just go hand in hand with, I don't want the government regulating my money, so I'll let these guys hang on to it. And these guys are now indicted by the federal government. So
Right.
you need to be really careful with this stuff, especially people. When guys who have stories about spacemen have great ideas about a property you should buy or where you should put some money, you need to be real careful about that.
Right, absolutely. And, as I say, go back to expandingfrontiersresearch.org to check out the work that we've done on Safe Moon and crypto and Joe Firmage and Skinwalker Ranch and some of these things that actually, do tie in together. And so I really, Jack, I'm incredibly proud of the work that you and I have done in 2023. And like you have mentioned, we've got so many FOIA requests that are going to be coming in. And it's just going to be, I have no doubt that 2024 is going to be a really stellar year.
Absolutely. And please go to expandingfrontiersresearch.org. You'll see our orange donate button that takes you to a secure PayPal link. If you value our work and you find it interesting, we really could appreciate and use your support with our FOIA fees, our website fees, producing these videos, licenses that we're going to have renewing this coming year, and an annual report will be filing, and these kinds of things. Speaking of this, I mean, the whole thing is just really on cue, the whole discussion for this next clip that I had interest, like we've talked about, in what's going on with some of these different agencies and people that called themselves UFO organizations. And Dr. Jensine Andresen wrote a book called Hide. She was generous enough to speak with.
What's happening with these startups and these special government employees, and how is that translating to information being given to the public?
Right. Okay. So essentially, again, the UAP topic is a case study. We can think of the UAP topic as a case study in a much broader series of points that I raise in the book. And I happen to be interested in the UAP topic, so I kind of went in through that door, but then I realized that the frames were getting larger and larger and larger. And as you say, I mean, who's really missing in all of this are the extraterrestrials, as far as I'm concerned, in the sense that this is all about human beings manipulating other human beings and doing it for, as you say, profit or geopolitical advantage.
Pretty much hits the nail on the head right there, that it should be noted that Dr. Andresen does lean towards she, if I understand her correctly, she does feel there is a likelihood that an extraterrestrial presence has been in contact with our planet. I point that out because she and I are in agreement on some other things. I don't necessarily agree with her about that. I would need to see her lay out what leads her to believe this. I have read her book Hyperconflation, and I have seen her lay out her research and points of why she would make the statement we just viewed, in that she can demonstrate, as we have, that there's all these people saying all these things that got their hand out for government grants to chase aliens around the skies, to do this, that, and the other, to get county funds to do their Phenomicon, where they tell their stories, where they talk about their head injuries, where they don't present any conclusive evidence for any of this. Yet we can look at record after record after record that they're saying it without evidence. So that in itself supports the statements that Dr. Andresen just made. And it's very concerning that this has had such a public relations campaign to be sold to Congress, to be sold to the public. I'm a bit cynical about politicians. I don't necessarily think that they are influenced and deceived as much as a lot of them, I think, typically don't care. And if they have consultants that say you need to get on board with this special interest group or not, that's what they'll do. I think that's just tends to be the nature of being a successful politician. And so even still, that whether they're personally deceived and personally think demons are flying around the sky or not, or aliens or whatever, the public relations campaign was successful enough that the consultants were telling them, we got nothing better. Let's hitch our wagon to this UFO story. And these are very concerning things. They have trickled down into a lot of upstart groups.
And sorry to lose you there, but I think something that we need to look at, and that we never even think about. I mean, we don't look at the money. I mean, you and I are trying to do that, but who are the groups behind the scenes that are giving people in politics money, and what are they trying to promote and why? I mean, there's there's so much more to this, and I think it's not as simple as this person is standing up to promote for UAP transparency and things. There are always games in politics. I'm sorry to say, that's just the way it rolls.
Yeah.
When you're and you are influenced, and money is the big thing. And so money and power. So I don't know, that's for another day, another batch of FOIA requests and more digging into things and following the money, which we'll continue to do. So
yeah, what I'd add to that is I think too often the skeptical researchers tend to fill in the motives of the people that make these wild assertions. They fill in the motives of the intelligence personnel that have helped get these stories floated around. I'm talking about Stratton, Grush, people like that. And the skeptics tend to want to connect, some of them, many of them, want to connect this all in some way, that they all believe in demons or they all are just stupid. And I don't buy that.
I don't buy that either. And I think there are a lot of people on both sides that are completely missing the point. So
I'd agree with that. I think that
but it is easier
we don't need to fill in the motive. We just know here he said that, he can't back it up. If we know conclusively why, then we'll report that. In the meantime, we don't know why he said.
But I mean, it's a lot easier to do, YouTube shows and just say, here it is, black and white. This is a little box we're going to put it into. The Tic Tac wasn't real, and da 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 da, and or whatever side you're going for, instead of looking at the bigger picture, which there is a bigger picture, and I don't see really anybody out there looking at that bigger picture. I mean, there may be, I know Green Street actually has done a few things that, that he is putting together the bigger picture. But I think for the most part, people are really falling asleep on the job, and on the skeptic side and on the true believer side. So I think we need to step away from the UFO lens and look at it in a broader perspective, because that's when you'll start to put together the pieces of the puzzle.
Yes, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
So on that note, my friend, we are going to close the show, and I want to just say, Jack, it's a pleasure working with you. I have learned a lot from you, and we have great conversations. I'm looking forward to, the next year. I think you and I are a great team because you have a skill set where I don't, and we play off each other very nicely, and I think that is definitely can be viewed by people that are hiding things as maybe a threat to their grifting. But anyway, it's going to be great to really dig in next year and expose more things. I want to just give a thanks out to Nate Carlisle from Fox 13 for covering Phenomicon and mentioning UFO Classified. Fox 13 has done another story on on Expanding Frontiers research. I must be getting old. I must be, my COVID brain is showing through right now. But also I want to thank Robert Gerke from the Salt Lake Tribune for also doing an article. Robert Gerke is an amazing journalist here, highly respected in Utah, and he wrote a piece on expanding frontiers and our archive. And so I want to just make sure, and also Stephen Greenstreet included us in one of his pieces. And so I just want to thank all of them. It is really nice when respectable people in mainstream journalism are paying attention to some of the reporting, some of the investigations that we are doing. That's really, really cool. So anyway, thank you, Jack. I want to thank all of you. Michael, thanks so much for your support. And Peter, I want to give you a shout out. Thank you for always talking about the show. And William, Bill, please give Venus my love. But thank you, and tell her I hope that she's feeling better. But thank you for putting the word out about our show. We need you, and if you can't donate, which I understand, I know it's after Christmas and the holidays and things, we would really appreciate you putting out information about us on social media, telling your friends about this, getting the word out. We can do so much on our end, and we are doing everything that we can, and we need your help. And so we appreciate it. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And Drew, yes, all the best for you as well. And I wish all of you guys a very happy new year. I'm obviously with COVID going to be staying at home and isolating again for the next few days. But Jack, thank you very much. I'm sorry that Mario wasn't here, excuse me, to be with all of us tonight. But you guys, thank you. Rachel, thank you guys. You were awesome. You guys stay safe and check out Expanding Frontiers Research. And I will catch you guys. I will let you know when the next show will be. I'm hoping next week. But you guys take care, and we will catch you soon. Bye, Jack.
Bye.